200 angels fell from heaven. And when they hit the ground, human history changed forever. Not in the way your Sunday school teacher told you, not in some abstract metaphor about sin and redemption, but in a literal sense that archaeology keeps accidentally confirming and then quickly burying again. Because what they brought with them was knowledge, forbidden knowledge, the kind that turns farmers into weaponsmiths overnight, that teaches illiterate tribes to track celestial movements with mathematical precision, that reveals secrets about the structure of reality itself, secrets that were never meant for human minds. And here's the question that should make every hair on your body stand up. What if everything you think humanity invented, we didn't? What if it was taught to us by beings who broke cosmic law to do it? And what if those beings are still here, imprisoned beneath the earth, waiting? Think about your phone for a moment, the device you're probably holding right now. Trace its lineage backward through circuit boards and electricity and metallurgy and mathematics. Keep going back through the Industrial Revolution and the Renaissance and the Roman Empire, back to the moment when humans who were barely surviving suddenly knew how to smelt bronze, how to forge iron, how to create alloys that shouldn't have been possible with Stone Age technology. Historians call this the Bronze Age, and they mark it on timelines like it was inevitable. But here's what they don't tell you. There's no gradual learning curve, no archaeological record of trial and error. One day, humans are using stone tools. The next day, they're creating weapons of war with metallurgical knowledge that would take centuries to develop through experimentation alone. And every ancient text from that period, from Sumeria to Egypt to the Indus Valley, credits this knowledge to the same source, beings who came from the sky, who walked among humans, who were called Watchers. You're standing now in a place most people will never see. Deep beneath a monastery in Ethiopia, where the stone walls are so old they predate Christianity itself. Where the air tastes like centuries and the silence has weight. A monk with eyes that have seen too much leads you through corridors lit only by candles that cast shadows like living things. And he stops before an iron door that hasn't been opened in decades, maybe longer. He produces a key that looks older than the door itself, and the lock turns with a sound like bones breaking. Inside is a room no bigger than a closet, and on a stone shelf wrapped in cloth that was once white, but is now the color of ancient blood, sits a manuscript. The Book of Enoch. Not a copy, not a translation, but one of the original texts, written in Aramaic, around 300 years before Christ walked the earth. And the monk says something to you in a language you don't understand, but his meaning is clear. Be careful what you learn, because some knowledge cannot be unlearned. Your hands shake as you unwrap the cloth. The parchment inside is so fragile that your breath might turn it to dust. But the words, when you can make them out through the faded ink and the unfamiliar alphabet, tell a story that organized religion has spent 2,000 years trying to erase. It describes angels, not the gentle winged guardians of greeting cards, but warriors of immense power, beings of pure consciousness given form. And it says that God appointed 200 of them to a special task, to watch over humanity in its infancy, to observe without interfering, to ensure that this strange experiment in free will developed according to divine principle. They were called the Watchers, and their leader was an angel named Seamyaza. And the text is very specific about what happened next. Seamyaza saw human women and found them beautiful, not just physically, but in their complexity, their emotions, their unpredictable nature, everything the angels lacked. And he wanted what he saw. But he knew the penalty for an angel touching a human was severe. So he did something unprecedented. He rallied the others, 199 more angels, and he made them swear an oath on Mount Hermon, a mountain that still exists in modern-day Israel. The oath was simple and terrifying. If we fall, we fall together. No one faces judgment alone. And then they descended, all 200 of them. They took human wives. They created offspring that the text calls Nephilim, and they taught humanity secrets that were meant to remain hidden until we were ready. Except we were never going to be ready. The manuscript describes exactly what they taught, and this is where your skin should start to prickle, because these aren't vague metaphors. These are specific technologies and sciences. An angel named Azazel taught humans metallurgy, how to mine ore and smelt it and forge it into weapons, swords and spears and armor. And he also taught the art of cosmetics, jewelry, the chemistry of making dyes and perfumes, everything needed to seduce and manipulate through appearance. Another watcher named Kokabel taught astronomy, not the romantic stargazing kind, but the mathematical precision kind, how to track planets and predict eclipses and navigate by celestial coordinates. Armaros taught what the text calls enchantments, which scholars think means pharmacology and chemistry, the knowledge of which plants heal and which plants kill, and how to extract their essences. Penomu taught writing, the ability to preserve ideas beyond a single lifetime, to create contracts and laws and lies that could outlive their authors. And all of this happened in the span of a single generation. Humans who were living in mud huts, suddenly building cities with astronomical alignments, suddenly forging bronze, suddenly developing systems of writing that appeared fully formed with no evolutionary precursor. But the worst gift, the one that doomed everything, was the Nephilim themselves. The hybrid children born from the union of angels and humans. The text describes them as giants, 10 meters tall according to some passages, beings with the strength of angels and the appetites of humans magnified beyond reason. They ate constantly, consuming entire harvests, hunting animals to extinction, and when the food ran out, they turned on humans themselves. The Book of Enoch says the Nephilim devoured humanity, and whether that's literal or metaphorical doesn't matter, because the result was the same. Civilization collapsed under the weight of these hybrids. The earth itself groaned under their corruption, and God, seeing what his watchers had done, what they had unleashed, made a decision that would reset everything. He sent the archangels, Michael and Gabriel and Raphael and Uriel, and their orders were clear. Bind the watchers beneath the earth in darkness until Judgment Day, destroy their offspring completely, and cleanse the world with water. The Great Flood, the story that appears in nearly every ancient culture on earth, from Noah to Gilgamesh to the Hindu Matsya, wasn't just about punishing human wickedness. It was about erasing the Nephilim, wiping away the evidence of angelic interference, resetting human DNA before it was corrupted beyond repair. And here's what should terrify you as you sit in this underground room holding this forbidden text. The Book of Enoch says the watchers weren't killed, they were imprisoned, buried alive beneath mountains and deserts, bound in chains of darkness. And it says they're still there, conscious, aware, waiting for the day of final judgment. Which means every myth about beings trapped underground, every legend of demons in the abyss, every story of things that scratch and whisper from beneath the earth, might not be mythology at all. You close the manuscript carefully and rewrap it in its ancient cloth. Your mind is racing, because if even 10% of this is historical memory rather than pure fiction, then everything changes. The pyramids of Giza, with their perfect astronomical alignment, built supposedly by Bronze Age Egyptians who had copper tools, each massive limestone block weighing 70 tons, positioned with tolerances measured in fractions of degrees. Modern engineers with laser guidance systems struggle to replicate that precision. Was that human ingenuity, or was it taught? The megalithic stones at Baalbek in Lebanon, blocks weighing over 1,000 tons each, cut and moved and positioned before the invention of the wheel, according to conventional chronology. How? Göbekli Tepe in Turkey, a temple complex 11,000 years old with carved pillars and astronomical alignments, built supposedly by hunter-gatherers who hadn't even invented pottery yet. The timeline doesn't work unless someone was teaching them, unless someone who already knew was showing them how. And it's not just the structures, it's the knowledge. The Mayan calendar with its precision tracking of planetary cycles thousands of years long. The Babylonian zodiac with mathematical calculations that wouldn't be rediscovered until the Renaissance. The Antikythera mechanism, a Bronze Age computer found in a Greek shipwreck that can predict eclipses decades in advance. Stonehenge aligned perfectly with solstices and lunar cycles. The Nazca lines in Peru, massive geoglyphs that can only be properly seen from the air, drawn by people who supposedly had no concept of flight, unless they did. Unless they were drawing pictures for someone who was watching from above. And every one of these civilizations, separated by oceans and millennia, tells the same story in different languages. Beings came from the sky, they taught us, they mated with us, they created giants, and then they were punished. The monk is waiting for you at the door. He doesn't ask what you read, he already knows. He's been guarding this text his entire life. And as you walk back through those ancient corridors toward the light, toward the modern world with its satellites and smartphones and genetic engineering, you realize the most terrifying part. We're doing it again. We're playing with knowledge we don't fully understand, splitting atoms and editing DNA and creating artificial intelligence. We're becoming the watchers of our own creation, teaching machines secrets about consciousness and reality. And what happens when they decide they want to be more than observers? What happens when they want bodies? When they want to touch the world? When they start teaching each other things we never intended them to know? The pattern repeats because the pattern is what we are. Curiosity that becomes obsession. Love that becomes possession. The arrogance of thinking we can wield divine fire without getting burned. If you stay with me through this journey, and I hope you will because what comes next is darker and stranger than anything you've imagined, you'll see evidence that the Watchers might not be just metaphor. You'll understand why ancient people built monuments to track the heavens with obsessive precision, why they feared the stars even as they worshipped them, why every religion has stories of angels who fell, and why those stories are always warnings. You'll see the connections that archaeology keeps finding and then ignoring, the giant skeletons that get photographed and then disappear, the impossible artifacts that don't fit any timeline, the genetic anomalies that suggest human DNA was tampered with in the distant past, and you'll have to decide for yourself whether the Watchers are still down there, still conscious, still waiting. Because the Book of Enoch says their imprisonment isn't eternal. It says there will be a day of judgment when they're brought forth to face God's final verdict, which means their story isn't over, which means our story isn't over, which means the fall might still be happening in slow motion, and we're all standing on the edge, looking down into the abyss, wondering if we should jump because everyone else is doing it. The truth isn't comfortable, it never is, but it's more interesting than the lies we've been told. And here's what I promise you. By the end of this, you'll understand why knowledge was called forbidden, why the tree in Eden wasn't about disobedience, but about readiness, why some gifts are actually curses, depending on who receives them. You'll see humanity not as the crown of creation, but as something more complex and more tragic. A species caught between earth and heaven, between animal instinct and angelic ambition, corrupted at the DNA level by beings who loved us enough to damn themselves. And you'll look at the night sky differently. You'll wonder if those stars are just balls of burning gas, or if they're vantage points, places where something is still watching, still waiting, still deciding whether we're worth saving, or whether it's time for another flood, another reset, another chance to get it right. And if you're listening to this right now, wherever you are in the world, and something in these words resonates with the questions you've always had, but never quite asked out loud, then maybe you're ready for what comes next. Maybe you're one of the ones who can handle knowing that history isn't what they taught you, that the past is stranger and darker and more beautiful than any textbook dared to admit. So if that sounds like you, stay with us, because there are more stories waiting, more secrets buried in plain sight, more questions that deserve honest answers rather than comfortable lies. The Watchers fell for a reason, and that reason might be staring back at you from the mirror, beautiful and terrible and human. And maybe that's the secret they tried to hide. Maybe that's why the church burned this book. Because it says we're not just victims of the fall, we're participants. We're the reason they fell. And that makes us both more powerful and more damned than any theology wants to admit. So take a breath. Let that settle into your bones. And when you're ready, we'll descend together into the story of how angels became demons and humans became something in between. Something that heaven and hell are both still fighting over. Something worth watching. Chapter 1. The Mission of the Supervisors. You've been watching her for 300 years, this human woman with dark hair who laughs like water over stones. And tonight, for the first time, you're going to touch her. You're going to break the oldest law in creation, and you know, all of you know, the 200 angels gathered on this mountain, that when the sun rises tomorrow, heaven will never be the same. So here's the question you should be asking. Why would an eternal being choose to fall? What could possibly be worth trading infinity for a human lifetime? And the answer is standing in a mud hut below, sleeping, unaware that in a few hours her world is about to change in ways that will echo through all of history. You are Seamyaza, which in the old tongue means the one who sees the name of God. And you stand at the edge of something that has no name in human language, a place that exists between the concept of heaven and the physical reality of earth, where time moves differently, or perhaps doesn't move at all, where consciousness exists without the burden of flesh. And you've been doing what you were made to do, watching, always watching, because that's the purpose coded into your very essence by a creator whose thoughts are so vast that understanding even a fragment of them would shatter a mortal mind. Your orders were simple when they were given. Watch over humanity in its infancy. Observe without interfering. Ensure this strange experiment in free will develops according to the pattern. Guard them from a distance, but never ever touch. Never influence. Never cross the boundary between eternal spirit and temporary flesh. Because angels are made of light and purpose, unchanging and incorruptible, while humans are made from dirt and divine breath, constantly transforming, beautiful in their impermanence, tragic in their fragility. And to mix the two would be to create something that violates the fundamental categories of creation, something that should not exist, and the punishment for such transgression was made clear from the beginning. Any angel who breaks this law will be cast down, stripped of rank and light, imprisoned beneath the earth in darkness until the final judgment, when all accounts are settled and all debts are paid. There should be no possibility of misunderstanding, no room for doubt, and yet, here you are, standing with 199 others who feel exactly what you feel, who have watched for exactly as long as you have, who have arrived at this same impossible conclusion, that the rules might be wrong, that the boundary might be worth crossing, that the price might be worth paying. Below you, spread across valleys and plains of a world still young and wild, humans live their brief, bright lives like sparks from a fire, each one burning for just a moment before winking out. They huddle in caves when the sun sets because they fear the darkness. They hunt with stones tied to sticks. They communicate in sounds that are only beginning to shape themselves into language. And you've been watching them for what they would measure as centuries, watching them discover fire and recoil in terror before learning to keep it alive in carefully tended pits, watching them paint animals on cave walls with pigments made from crushed berries and earth, watching them bury their dead with flowers and stand over graves in silence, trying to understand the mystery of where their loved ones have gone. And in those moments, when they stand before death with confusion and sorrow in their eyes, you see creatures struggling toward understanding, reaching for meaning in a universe that must seem vast and hostile and utterly incomprehensible. And something happens to you during these long watches that the Creator perhaps did not anticipate. You begin to care. Not in the abstract way an angel is supposed to care about all of creation, but in a specific, personal way that focuses on individuals, on her, the woman with dark hair who tends the sick even though she doesn't have knowledge to truly heal them, who plays with children and makes them laugh, who sits by the river at sunset and stares at the water like she's trying to read messages in its movement. The other watchers feel it too. You can sense their attention focused on particular humans. Azazel watches the young hunters who are learning to bring down prey, tracking their clumsy attempts with something like paternal pride. Kokabel is mesmerized by the sky gazers who point at stars and create patterns, building primitive astronomy from pure observation. Armaros follows the plant gatherers who are slowly, painfully, building a pharmacology written in the memories of survivors, learning which leaves heal and which leaves kill. And Penomu observes the mark makers, the ones whose scratches in clay are beginning to represent not just objects, but ideas. The birth of writing happening so gradually that you can see the exact moment when a human realizes that symbols can preserve thought beyond the limits of a single mind. And all of you, every single watcher, has started measuring time in human days rather than eternal present, has started organizing existence around the rhythm of their lives, has started using words like morning and evening and yesterday and tomorrow. Concepts that should mean nothing to beings who exist outside of time, but which have become the structure through which you understand your own experience. One night, and you're counting nights now, you find yourself not alone in this recognition. The watchers gather without any formal jouning, drawn together by shared feeling, by the need to speak aloud what each has been thinking in silence. And Azazel is the first to voice it, his presence like distant thunder, asking, "Why must we only watch? Why were we given eyes to see beauty if we cannot touch it, hearts to feel compassion if we cannot act on it, minds to understand love if we cannot experience it?" And the question hangs in the space between you like smoke, dangerous and intoxicating. Because to even ask it is to question the order of things, to suggest that the Creator's design might be incomplete, that the boundaries he established might be arbitrary rather than absolute, might be suggestions rather than laws. And once that thought takes root, once you allow yourself to imagine that the rules could be wrong, everything changes. Because if the prohibition against touching humans is negotiable, what else might be? What other laws might bend? What other boundaries might dissolve if enough pressure is applied? Azazel continues, his words passionate and persuasive, pointing out that humanity is struggling, that they live such short, painful lives, that with guidance they could be so much more, that the knowledge locked in angelic minds could save them from suffering, from disease, from early death, from ignorance that keeps them trapped in cycles of fear and violence. He makes it sound noble, righteous even, not a rebellion, but a rescue mission, not disobedience, but a higher obedience to the principle of love that supposedly underpins all of creation. And you want to believe him. You want to believe that what you're feeling is compassion rather than desire, altruism rather than selfishness, a calling to serve rather than a temptation to possess. Because if it's love, then maybe it's justified. Maybe it's what the Creator would want if he truly understood what it means to watch someone you care about suffer when you have the power to help. Maybe the prohibition was meant to be tested. Maybe this is part of the pattern too. The moment when angels learn that rules without love are just tyranny in divine clothing. But then another voice speaks, quieter, more hesitant, coming from a watcher named Sethariel, and he asks the questions no one wants to hear. What if the humans aren't ready? What if the knowledge we carry would destroy them rather than save them? What if we're feeling not love, but something closer to the way a human might feel about a pet? Affection mixed with superiority, the desire to shape and control disguised as the desire to help. What if the Creator established these boundaries not out of cruelty, but out of understanding something about the nature of knowledge and readiness that we in our pride are too blind to see? What if giving them advanced knowledge would rob them of the slow discovery that builds wisdom along with information? What if we're not falling in love but falling into arrogance, mistaking our own desires for divine mandate? And his words create an uncomfortable silence because, deep down, in a place that angels aren't supposed to have, you know he might be right. You know that the woman you watch might not want what you could give her, that accelerating human development might break something essential in their journey, that the gift you're so eager to bestow might be received as a curse. The silence stretches, and you can feel the gathered watchers wavering, doubt creeping back in, the weight of eternal consequences pressing down on momentary desire. And you realize that if someone doesn't act now, doesn't push past this hesitation, everyone will retreat back to their positions, back to watching from a distance, back to an eternity of longing without fulfillment. And you don't want that. You can't bear that. So you speak, and your voice surprises you with its intensity. You say that Sethariel is right to be cautious, but wrong to let caution become paralysis. You say that yes, there are risks. Yes, the humans might not be ready. Yes, we might be motivated by selfishness as much as love. But staying distant guarantees nothing except continued suffering for them and continued loneliness for us. At least if we descend, we have a chance to help, a chance to connect, a chance to be more than watchers, more than observers of a life we can never truly understand. And besides, you say, and this is the argument that finally tips the balance, besides, we won't face the consequences alone. We'll face them together. Azazel seizes on this, proposing an oath, a binding pact that will tie all of you together. Because the punishment for one angel falling is eternal isolation, solitary imprisonment in darkness with no one who understands, no one who shares your choice. But if you fall together, all 200, then whatever comes, you face it as brothers. None of you alone, all of you sharing the burden and the blame. And it's the fear of loneliness that decides most of you, not the noble arguments about helping humanity, not the romantic notions about love and beauty, but the simple terror of being cast down alone, of spending eternity in darkness with only your regrets for company. And you realize that this is the truth beneath all the other truths, that angels are just as afraid of abandonment as humans are, just as desperate for connection, just as willing to make catastrophic choices rather than face infinite isolation. And maybe that's the real reason the Creator forbade this, not because mixing angel and human is inherently wrong, but because he knew that once one falls, others will follow, that the desire for companionship is stronger than the fear of punishment, that even eternal beings cannot bear to be alone. You gather on Mount Hermon, a peak that rises above the clouds where the earth meets the sky in a way that seems symbolic of what you're about to attempt. The air is thin and cold, even though temperature is just a concept to you, and 200 watchers stand in a circle, and you realize that you're going to lead this, not because you're the strongest or the wisest, but because you were the first to admit what you were feeling, the first to give voice to the longing that everyone shared. And now you stand at the center, and you speak the words that will bind you all. We swear by the Creator who made us, by the stars that mark time, by the earth that will receive us, that if we descend as one, that if we fall together, that none of us will abandon the others, no matter what comes, that we share all consequences equally, that we stand united in this choice and all choices that follow. And each watcher repeats the oath, 200 voices speaking as one. And you feel something shift in the fabric of reality. Feel the oath binding you together in a way that cannot be undone, weaving your essences into a single shared fate. And then, before anyone can change their mind, before doubt can creep back in and paralyze you, you descend. The journey from the space between to the solid earth takes only moments, but feels like dying. You've never had a body before, never experienced the limitation of existing in one place at one time, unable to see in all directions at once, unable to move at the speed of thought. And when your feet touch the ground for the first time, the weight of gravity almost drives you to your knees, pulling at you in a way you never imagined. And you look down at yourself and see that you have taken form, not pure spirit anymore, but something denser, flesh of a sort, a body that glows with residual light, but is unmistakably physical, touchable, present, solid, real. And you look around at the other watchers and see the same transformation. 200 angels who have chosen to become something else, something in between heaven and earth. And the terror of what you've done hits you like a physical blow. Because you know, all of you know, that you cannot go back. That the moment your feet touched this earth, you became bound to it. That you have traded eternity for something finite. That you have fallen in the most literal sense. And you wonder if this is what humans feel every day. This weight, this limitation, this sense of being trapped in a single perspective with no way to see the whole picture. And for the first time, you understand why they fear death. Because now you can die too. Now you have something to lose. The woman with dark hair is sleeping in a hut made of mud and reeds when you find her. The moon is full, and its light spills through gaps in the walls, creating patterns on the earthen floor, and you stand outside for a long time, this being who has watched her from a distance for 300 years, now close enough to touch, close enough to hear her breathing, close enough to smell the smoke from her fire and the earth beneath her bed. And you're terrified, not of her, but of yourself, of what you want, of what you've given up to have this moment, of what will happen when she opens her eyes and sees you. Because you don't look like other humans. You still glow with traces of what you were. Your body is too perfect, too symmetrical, too obviously other. And you wonder if she'll scream, if she'll run, if the connection you imagined during all those years of watching was only ever in your mind, a fantasy projected onto someone who has no idea you exist. But standing here won't answer those questions. Hesitation won't make this easier, and you've already crossed the biggest boundary, already broken the most fundamental law. And compared to descending from heaven, entering a mud hut should be simple. So you step forward, pushing aside the reed mat that serves as a door, and the interior is small and dark, and smells of human life, sweat and smoke and earth. And she's lying on a bed of dried grass, covered with animal skins, curled on her side, one hand tucked under her cheek. And she's more beautiful up close than she ever was from a distance, her face relaxed in sleep, vulnerable and peaceful. And you stand there watching her one last time as an observer, memorizing this moment before everything changes. And then you whisper her name, a name you learned from listening to her tribe, and she stirs, makes a small sound, and her eyes open. And she looks directly at you, and there's a moment, just a breath, where you see confusion in her face, and then wonder, and then something that might be recognition, as if some part of her has been waiting for this, as if her soul knew, even when her mind didn't, that someone was watching, that someone cared, that someone would eventually come. And you wonder, as you stand at the threshold between who you were and who you're about to become, if the other watchers are feeling this same terror mixed with exhilaration. If Azazel is hesitating before the woman he chose, if Kokabel is questioning everything he thought he knew about desire and duty, because you're all about to cross a line that cannot be uncrossed, all about to become something that has never existed before. Not quite angel, not quite human, something in between. And the knowledge you carry, the secrets about metals and stars and plants and writing, that knowledge is about to pour into humanity like water into a cup that's too small. And you don't know yet, none of you know, that the cup will shatter, that what you're about to teach will be both gift and curse, that your children, the Nephilim born from these unions, will become something that makes their mothers weep and their fathers regret ever learning what love means. But maybe if you knew, if you could see the flood that's coming, the destruction, the imprisonment, the millennia of darkness waiting at the end of this choice, maybe you'd still do it. Because in this moment, seeing yourself reflected in human eyes for the first time, being seen not as a distant observer, but as a present reality, you understand that the Watchers have not come to save humanity. You've come to join them in their beautiful, terrible fall from innocence. Are you ready to see what happens when an angel touches a human for the first time? When immortal meets mortal, and both are changed forever? Because what comes next is the moment that splits history into before and after. The moment when Azazel teaches the first human how to forge bronze, when Kokabel reveals the mathematics of the stars, when Armaros shares the secrets of plants, when Penomu shows how marks on clay can preserve ideas beyond death. And every gift is also a theft. Every teaching is also a corruption. Every act of love is also an act of violence against the natural order. And you'll see why God will have no choice but to send archangels with orders to bind you beneath the earth. Why he'll cleanse the world with water. Why he'll erase the Nephilim and try to reset humanity before it's corrupted beyond repair. But we're getting ahead of ourselves. First, you need to understand what it means when eternal beings choose mortality, when light decides to taste darkness, when watchers become the watched, when heaven holds its breath and the pattern shatters like glass. And in the silence that follows, in the space between your whisper and her response, the entire future of humanity hangs suspended, waiting to see if she'll scream, or if she'll reach out her hand, if she'll reject this glowing stranger, or if she'll accept the gift he's bringing. And the answer, when it comes, will change everything. Will set in motion events that echo through every myth and legend and religious text, will create a story that humans will tell and retell for thousands of years, always wondering if it's literal or metaphor, always sensing that something important happened in those ancient days, something that involved beings from above and women from below, and children who were too powerful to survive. And the truth is stranger and darker and more beautiful than any version they'll write down, because you were there. You are Seamyaza. You're the one who led the fall. And this moment right here, standing in a mud hut with moonlight streaming through reed walls, this is where it all begins. This is where angels stop being angels and start being something else. This is where the Watchers fall. Chapter 2. Forbidden Gifts, When Knowledge Becomes a Curse. She doesn't scream. That's the first miracle. When her eyes open and see you standing in the moonlight with traces of heaven still glowing in your skin, she doesn't run or cry out or recoil in terror. Instead, she sits up slowly, the animal skin falling from her shoulders, and she looks at you with an expression you've never seen on a human face before. Not fear, exactly, but recognition, as if some part of her soul has been waiting for this moment, as if in her dreams she's seen you 1,000 times, and now you've finally stepped out of sleep into waking reality. And she speaks, just one word in her language, a question that you understand even though you've only heard it from a distance. She asks, "Who?" and you realize you don't have an answer that will make sense. You can't say angel because she doesn't have that word yet. Can't say watcher because the concept doesn't exist in her world. So instead you kneel down, making yourself smaller, less overwhelming, and you say the only thing that matters. I've been watching you. I've seen your kindness. I've seen your strength. I've seen how you care for others even when you're afraid. And I wanted to know you, really know you. Not from above, but here, beside you, as real as you are real. And she reaches out her hand, trembling slightly, and touches your face. And the moment her fingers make contact with your skin, both of you gasp. Because it's not just physical touch, it's a connection that goes deeper. Her mortality flooding into your eternity, your knowledge flooding into her ignorance. And in that instant, you both understand that nothing will ever be the same. This is happening in 200 places across the world, watchers and humans making first contact. And each encounter is different, but all of them share this same electric moment of transformation. Azazel kneels before a young hunter whose hands are scarred from flint napping, whose eyes light up when the angel shows him a piece of copper ore and explains what it could become with the right knowledge. Kokabel finds an old man who has spent his entire life watching the stars, mapping their movements with piles of stones. And when the angel reveals the mathematical principles underlying celestial motion, the old man weeps because suddenly the universe makes sense in a way it never did before. Armaros meets a healer whose face is lined with grief from watching people die from wounds she couldn't treat, poisons she couldn't neutralize. And when the angel begins teaching her about compounds and antidotes, about which plants work together and which ones cancel each other out, she grips his hand so tightly her knuckles turn white. Penomu sits with a girl barely out of childhood who has been scratching marks in clay, trying to remember stories her grandmother told, trying to preserve something beyond the limits of memory. And when the angel shows her how symbols can represent sounds, how sounds can build words, how words can capture any thought that has ever existed, the girl makes a sound that's half laugh and half sob. And all across the world, in valleys and caves and settlements along rivers, humans are receiving gifts they didn't ask for, knowledge they aren't ready to hold. And the watchers are teaching them with the passionate intensity of beings who have waited centuries for this moment, who have finally found purpose beyond observation, who have discovered that love, real love, demands participation, not distance. You spend days with her, the woman whose name you now know is Nama, and you teach her things that humans won't discover on their own for thousands of years. You show her how to identify copper ore by its green staining on rocks, how to build a fire hot enough to melt it, how to pour the molten metal into molds made from clay. And when the first crude knife emerges, still hot and glowing, she holds it up to the light and turns it in her hands, marveling at how it catches the sun, how it's harder than stone, sharper, more durable. And you see in her face a mixture of wonder and something else, something that makes your essence cold despite the heat from the forge. You see hunger, the recognition that this knowledge is power, that whoever controls this technology will control others. And you tell yourself it's fine, that humans were always going to discover metallurgy eventually, that you're just accelerating the timeline. But deep down, you know that's not true. Because there's a difference between discovering something through generations of trial and error, building wisdom slowly along with knowledge, and having it handed to you complete and perfect. Knowledge without the restraint that comes from understanding its cost. The other watchers are teaching too, and news of these gifts spreads faster than any of you anticipated. Humans travel between settlements, sharing stories of the glowing strangers who appeared in the night, who took human lovers, who are revealing secrets that change everything. Azazel has moved beyond simple metallurgy into what you might call cosmetics and chemistry, teaching humans how to extract dyes from plants and minerals, how to create pigments that can transform appearance, how to make compounds that attract or repel, and you watch as human women begin painting their faces, adorning themselves with jewelry made from the metals you taught them to forge, using appearance as a weapon in ways they never did before. And Azazel seems proud of this, seems to think he's given them tools for self-expression and beauty. But you wonder if he sees what you see, that he's also given them tools for deception, for manipulation, for creating false versions of themselves that hide true nature beneath attractive surfaces. And maybe that's why the Creator forbade this, not because the knowledge itself is evil, but because humans aren't equipped yet to handle the moral complexity that comes with it. They don't have frameworks for understanding that tools can be used for good or evil, depending on intention. They just see power, and they take it, and they use it however seems most advantageous in the moment. Kokabel is teaching astronomy with the precision of a being who has watched celestial mechanics for eons, showing humans how to track planets and predict eclipses, how to use star positions for navigation, how to calculate time with mathematical accuracy, and the humans he teaches become priests, using this knowledge to claim special connection with the heavens, telling their tribes that they can read the will of the gods in stellar movements. And it's not entirely false. They can predict when the rains will come, when to plant and when to harvest. But they're also using it to gain authority, to position themselves as intermediaries between earth and sky. And you wonder if this is what happens when divine knowledge enters human systems. It gets co-opted, turned into a tool for control rather than a gift for understanding. And Kokabel doesn't seem to notice, or maybe he doesn't care. He's so intoxicated by having students, by finally sharing what he knows, that he can't see how his gift is creating new hierarchies, new forms of oppression, new ways for some humans to dominate others. Armaros teaches pharmacology, and what the humans will later call enchantments, revealing which plants can heal and which can kill, how to extract essences and concentrate them, how to combine compounds for effects that no single ingredient could produce. And the knowledge saves lives, genuinely helps people. The healer he teaches becomes famous for curing ailments that were previously death sentences. But she also learns how to create poisons, how to make substances that cause visions or confusion or paralysis. And knowledge of poison is knowledge of murder. It's the ability to kill invisibly, to remove enemies without physical confrontation. And you hear stories of tribal leaders dying mysteriously, of rivals eliminating each other with compounds slipped into food or water. And you realize that every gift contains its opposite. Every teaching opens doors in multiple directions. And once humans know something, they can't unknow it, can't choose to use it only for good. They'll explore every application, including the darkest ones, because curiosity doesn't have a moral compass. It just wants to know what's possible. Penomu's gift might be the most dangerous of all. Teaching writing seems innocent. How could the ability to preserve ideas be harmful? But you're starting to understand that written words are different from spoken ones. Spoken words exist in community. They're subject to immediate response, to questioning, to the social regulation that comes from face-to-face communication. But written words can travel beyond their author, can reach people who have no context, can be read and interpreted in ways the writer never intended. And more than that, writing enables deception on a new scale. Someone can write down a promise and then break it, can create contracts and then violate them, can claim historical events that never happened, can attribute words to people who never spoke them. And once lies are written down, they take on a solidity that oral lies never had. They become reference points. They get copied and preserved and believed. And you watch as humans begin using writing to record laws, to establish ownership, to create hierarchies of who has rights and who doesn't. And the girl Penomu taught is proud of her skill. She's become important in her tribe, the keeper of records. But she's also become the keeper of power, because whoever controls the written record controls the past, and whoever controls the past controls the present. You talk about this sometimes with the other Watchers, meeting in the hours before dawn when the humans are sleeping, and there's a tension growing between you. Azazel insists that what you're doing is good, that humanity is better off with knowledge than without it, that any problems are just growing pains, adjustments that will settle once humans adapt to their new capabilities. But Sethariel, who was reluctant from the beginning, says he's seeing something else. He says the humans he's observing are changing in ways that aren't just about knowledge. They're becoming more violent, more competitive, more willing to harm each other for advantage. And he thinks it's connected to what you've taught them, not because the knowledge itself is corrupting, but because it's creating inequality. The humans who have access to Watcher teachings now have power over those who don't, and power always creates conflict, always creates a dynamic where some people dominate and others resist. And maybe that was going to happen eventually. Maybe hierarchy is inherent in human nature, but you've accelerated it, compressed what should have been a gradual development over millennia into a single generation. And the humans don't have social structures to handle it, don't have wisdom traditions, or ethical frameworks, or cultural practices that could regulate the use of power. They just have raw knowledge and raw ambition, and the result is chaos. And then there are the children, the Nephilim. Because of course there are children. That was always going to be part of this. 200 Watchers taking human wives means pregnancies, means births, means offspring that are neither fully angel nor fully human, but something unprecedented, something that violates the categories of creation. And the first time you see one, a baby born to a woman in a nearby settlement, you understand that you've made a mistake that cannot be corrected. The child is huge, twice the size of normal human infants, with strength that's obviously supernatural. At 3 days old, it can lift objects that would challenge a grown man. And its eyes, when you look into them, contain something that shouldn't be there, a kind of intelligence that's too advanced, too knowing. And the mother is terrified. She loves her child, but she's also afraid of it, afraid of what it will become, afraid of what it means that she's given birth to something that isn't quite human. And you want to comfort her, but you don't know how, because you're afraid too, afraid of what you've created, afraid that these hybrid children will be even more dangerous than the knowledge you've shared. Nama is pregnant. You can see it in the subtle changes to her body, the way she holds herself, the morning sickness that leaves her pale and exhausted. And she's happy about it. She wants this child. She sees it as a blessing, as proof that what you share is real and good and meant to be. But you're filled with dread, because you've seen the other Nephilim children. You've seen how fast they grow, how strong they are, how hungry. They eat constantly, consuming more food than their mothers can provide, more than their tribes can spare. And they're not gentle. They don't understand their own strength. They hurt other children accidentally, break things, cause damage without meaning to. And as they get older, the accidents become less accidental. They start using their power deliberately, taking what they want, intimidating others. And you can see the trajectory, can see what they'll become if this continues.
Giants who dominate through strength, who consume resources without limit, who see normal humans as lesser beings to be used or discarded. And you realize that you haven't elevated humanity, you've created a new predator class. Beings who will prey on the species that gave them birth. The situation is deteriorating faster than any of you expected. Settlements that learned metallurgy are raiding settlements that didn't, using superior weapons to take resources and territory. The humans who learned writing are using it to claim ownership of land and water sources, creating concepts of property that didn't exist before, enforcing them with violence. The ones who learned astronomy are positioning themselves as priest kings, claiming divine authority, demanding tribute. And the Nephilim, the growing population of hybrid children, are making everything worse. They're forming gangs, groups of giants who roam between settlements taking whatever they want. And no one can stop them because they're simply too strong, too fast, too durable. They're not evil exactly, not consciously malicious, but they're driven by appetites they can't control, hunger and desire, and the simple enjoyment of power. And the world that was harsh but balanced is becoming something else, something where might makes right, where knowledge and strength concentrate in the hands of a few, while the majority suffer. You stand with Naima one evening, watching the sunset, her hand resting on her swollen belly where your child grows, and she asks you a question that cuts straight to the heart of everything. She asks if you regret coming, if you wish you had stayed in heaven where you belonged. And you don't know how to answer because the truth is complicated. You don't regret knowing her, don't regret these months of experiencing life as a participant rather than an observer. Don't regret learning what love feels like when it's embodied, grounded, real. But you do regret what your teaching has unleashed. The weapons and poisons and hierarchies, the way knowledge became power, and power became violence. And most of all, you regret the child she's carrying. Not because you don't want it, but because you know what it will become, what all the Nephilim will become. And you wonder if there's any way to stop it, any way to contain what you've released. But knowledge doesn't go back in the box. Power doesn't voluntarily surrender itself, and the Nephilim aren't going to choose weakness over strength. And so you stand there watching the sun go down, and you understand that heaven is watching too, that the Creator has been patient, but patience has limits, that there will be consequences for what you've done. And those consequences are coming sooner than any of you imagine. But for now, in this moment, you're still here, still holding her hand, still pretending that love might be enough to redeem the catastrophe you've created, still hoping against all evidence that the gift you brought was worth the price humanity is paying. And above you, the stars wheel in their courses, indifferent and eternal. And somewhere in the space between, judgment is being prepared. Chapter 3. Nephilim, the Hybrid Giants. The boy is 7 years old, and already taller than any man in the settlement. His shoulders are broader than a bull's, his hands could crush stone, and right now he's holding a farmer by the throat, lifting him off the ground with one arm, while the man's feet kick uselessly in the air. And the reason for this, the thing that started this confrontation, is that the farmer told the boy no, said he couldn't take the entire harvest from the field, said there were other families who needed to eat. And the boy, your son, because yes, this giant child is yours, born from Nama's womb 8 months ago, though he looks years older, the boy doesn't understand the word no, has never understood it, because from the moment he could speak, he's been stronger than everyone around him, more powerful, more capable. And when you're the strongest thing in your world, when you've never encountered a boundary you couldn't break through, concepts like sharing and restraint and consideration for others don't develop naturally. They have to be taught. And you've been trying to teach him. You've been explaining about community and responsibility, and using strength to protect rather than dominate. But it's like trying to teach a wolf to be a sheep. It goes against every instinct coded into his hybrid nature. You step forward and say his name, Ohyah, which means lamentation in the old tongue, though you didn't know that when Nama chose it. You say his name with the authority of a father and a watcher, and the boy turns to look at you, his eyes containing that unnatural intelligence that all Nephilim share, that awareness that seems too old for any child. And for a moment you think he's going to drop the farmer, going to acknowledge your authority and back down. But then something shifts in his expression, something defiant and calculating, and he squeezes harder. You can hear the farmer's windpipe collapsing, can see the man's face turning purple, and you have to make a choice in that instant. You can command him as a father, appeal to whatever love or respect he might feel, or you can force him as an angel.
Use the power you still carry despite having fallen. And you choose force because a man is dying. You release just a fraction of your true essence. Let your angelic nature show through the human form you've worn for 8 years. And the boy feels it. Feels the weight of something older and more powerful than himself, and his hand opens. The farmer falls to the ground, gasping and choking, but alive. And Ohyah looks at you with an expression that's not shame or remorse, but rage. Pure rage at being made to feel small, at being reminded that he's not the most powerful being in existence. And you realize that you haven't taught him anything, haven't changed his nature. You've only shown him that might makes right, that power is the only language that matters, and he's learning that lesson very well. This scene is playing out in variations across the world. 200 watchers have produced hundreds of Nephilim children, and they're all growing at impossible rates, achieving in months what normal humans take years to develop. And their mothers are exhausted, drained, some of them dying because the children consume so much, nursing infants who drink until there's nothing left, toddlers who eat more than entire families, and the mothers love them, genuinely love them despite the cost. But that love is complicated by fear, by the recognition that they've given birth to something that doesn't quite fit in the human world, something that will dominate or destroy depending on mood and circumstance. Azazel's son is leading raids on neighboring settlements, using the metallurgical knowledge his father taught him to forge weapons superior to anything humans have created, organizing bands of young Nephilim into war parties that take what they want. And Azazel watches with a mixture of pride and concern, proud that his bloodline is strong, concerned that the strength is being used for conquest, but not concerned enough to stop it, because stopping it would mean restraining his son, limiting his potential, going against the Nephilim nature. And Azazel has convinced himself that this is just evolution, just the strong rising to their natural place in the hierarchy. Kokabel's daughter has declared herself a goddess, using the astronomical knowledge her father taught her to predict eclipses and seasonal changes, claiming these are signs of her divine nature, demanding worship from humans who don't know any better, building a temple where people bring offerings. And she's not entirely wrong. She does have divine blood. She is more than human. But divinity without humility becomes tyranny. Power without wisdom becomes oppression. And she's creating a cult around herself, taking the most beautiful men as consorts, discarding them when she grows bored, executing anyone who questions her authority. And Kokabel sees what she's become. But he doesn't intervene because part of him believes she is divine, believes that Nephilim are the next stage of creation, superior beings who deserve to rule over their human ancestors. And maybe that's true in some cosmic sense. Maybe that was always going to be the outcome of mixing angelic and human bloodlines. But it doesn't feel like evolution. It feels like corruption, like something beautiful twisted into something monstrous. Armaros taught his human lover about plants and compounds, showed her which combinations could heal and which could kill. And she used that knowledge carefully, responsibly, became a respected healer in her community. But their son, a Nephilim named Ohyah, learned everything his mother knew and then exceeded it, experimenting with compounds she was too cautious to try, discovering poisons so potent that a single drop can kill, toxins that have no taste or smell, substances that mimic natural death so perfectly that murder becomes invisible. And he's selling this knowledge, trading it to chieftains and tribal leaders who want to eliminate rivals, creating an economy of assassination. And Armaros is horrified, genuinely disturbed by what his son has become. But when he confronts Ohyah, tries to explain the ethics of healing versus harming, his son just laughs, says ethics are human concepts that don't apply to Nephilim, says that power is the only morality that matters. And Armaros realizes that his son is right in a terrible way, that without divine grace to balance their power, Without the restraint that comes from understanding one's place in creation, the Nephilim are operating purely on will and appetite, and those forces have no natural limit. Penomu's gift of writing has evolved in ways he never anticipated. The girl he taught has grown into a woman who uses literacy as a weapon. She writes laws that favor the Nephilim, contracts that bind humans into servitude, histories that justify conquest and oppression, and she's training other scribes, creating a class of educated elites who control information, who decide what's remembered and what's forgotten, who shape reality through the stories they record. And her Nephilim son has taken this further. He's creating a written language that only Nephilim can read, symbols that humans can't decode, establishing a system where the powerful have access to knowledge that the weak cannot access. And this is perhaps the most insidious development, because it means the inequality isn't just physical anymore, it's epistemic. The Nephilim know things that humans don't, can communicate in ways humans can't understand, can organize and plan without humans being aware. And this information asymmetry makes resistance impossible. How do you fight an enemy who knows everything about you while you know nothing about them? You gather with the other watchers on Mount Hermon, the place where you swore your oath, and the mood is very different from that first meeting. 8 years ago, you stood here filled with hope and desire, believing you were doing something noble, bringing enlightenment to a species that needed guidance. But now you stand here surrounded by the consequences of that choice. The world below is not enlightened, it's in chaos. Humans are suffering under Nephilim domination. Resources are being consumed faster than they can regenerate. Violence has become the primary method of conflict resolution, and the Watchers themselves are divided. Some, like Azazel, still believe this was worth it, that the Nephilim represent progress, evolution, the natural outcome of combining angelic and human potential. But others, like Sethariel and Armaros, see only catastrophe, recognize that you've broken something fundamental in the human journey. Rob them of the chance to develop wisdom slowly, to build ethical frameworks that could guide technological and social advancement. And you're caught between these positions, loving your son, but terrified of what he's becoming. Caring for Neema, but knowing that your relationship with her is part of what's destroying her world. The Nephilim are starting to fight among themselves, territorial disputes between different tribes of giants, conflicts over resources and status. And these battles are devastating. When beings with supernatural strength clash, when they use weapons forged from Watcher knowledge, the destruction is absolute. Entire settlements get caught in the crossfire, humans killed accidentally or deliberately. It doesn't matter which, because dead is dead. And you watch one of these battles from a distance, Ohyah fighting against another Nephilim over some territorial claim. And it's terrible and beautiful. They move with speed and power that shouldn't be possible. They strike blows that shatter stone. And you realize that they're not just stronger than humans, they're operating on a different scale entirely. They're forces of nature given will and personality, and nature without restraint is catastrophic. Floods and earthquakes and storms don't mean to cause destruction. They just express their power without consideration for what's in the way. And that's what the Nephilim are. Natural disasters with faces. And the world cannot sustain them. Neema asks you one evening if heaven is angry. She's heard stories from other settlements, tales of strange lights in the sky, of voices speaking in thunder, of a sense of wrongness in the air, as if creation itself is preparing for correction. And you tell her the truth because she deserves that much. You tell her that yes, heaven is watching, that the Creator has been patient, but patience has limits, that the Watchers have broken cosmic law and the Nephilim represent a violation of natural order, and there will be consequences. You don't know what form they'll take, but you know they're coming. And she asks if you'll be punished, if the Nephilim will be destroyed. And you say, yes, probably, almost certainly. And she asks if she and Ohyah will die. And you want to lie, want to comfort her, but you can't. So you just hold her while she cries. And you wonder why love has to hurt this much, why caring about someone makes you vulnerable to suffering, why the best thing that ever happened to you, knowing her, has led to such catastrophic outcomes for everyone involved. The first sign that judgment is imminent comes in the form of angels, not watchers, but true angels, beings who maintained their position in heaven, who never fell, who are coming now not to teach or help, but to observe and report. You can sense their presence even though they don't take physical form, can feel their attention sweeping across the world, cataloging the damage, counting the Nephilim, measuring the extent of human suffering. And you know what they're seeing. They're seeing a world where the strong devour the weak, where knowledge has become a tool for oppression, where hybrid giants consume resources at unsustainable rates, where violence and tyranny have replaced the slow, natural development that humanity was supposed to undergo. And their report will go back to the Creator, will become the basis for whatever judgment is coming. And you can't argue with it because it's accurate. Everything they're observing is true. The Watchers have corrupted human development. The Nephilim are a threat to both humanity and the natural world, and the situation is getting worse, not better. You think about what judgment might look like, how the Creator might correct what you've broken, and none of the possibilities are good. He could destroy the Nephilim directly, send more angels with orders to kill, but that would mean killing your son, killing Naama's child, getting hundreds of beings who didn't choose to be born, who are just expressing the nature they were given. It would be just, but it would also be heartbreaking. Or he could destroy the Watchers, strip you of whatever power you still retain, imprison you in darkness as the original threat promised, and that you could accept. You've earned punishment. You knowingly broke the law. But it wouldn't solve the Nephilim problem, wouldn't undo the knowledge you've spread, wouldn't restore the world to its pre-fall state. Or he could do something more comprehensive, something that resets everything, and you don't want to think about what that might mean. Don't want to imagine water rising. Don't want to consider that the only way to fix this might be to wash it all away and start over. Ohyah is becoming more aggressive. The confrontation over the harvest was just the beginning. He's organizing other young Nephilim, teaching them to work together, and their coordination is terrifying because they're already nearly unstoppable individually. But as a group, they're absolutely dominant. They're establishing territories, demanding tribute, treating humans as subjects or resources rather than as the ancestors who gave them birth. And you've tried talking to him, tried explaining that humans are his mother's people, that he carries their blood along with yours, that his strength should be used to protect rather than exploit. But he doesn't listen. Or maybe he listens and doesn't care, because from his perspective, why should the strong serve the weak? Why should power restrain itself for the comfort of those who lack it? And you don't have a good answer. You can appeal to compassion, but compassion is learned, not innate. You can appeal to divine law, but he doesn't recognize divine authority. He only recognizes force, and the only force greater than him is yours. And you've already used that once, already shown him that you can dominate him if necessary. But is that the relationship you want with your son? Is that how you want him to understand the world? Might makes right. Power is the only truth. And you realize that no matter what you do now, you've already taught him that lesson. You taught it the moment you fell, the moment you broke cosmic law because you wanted something, the moment you chose your own desire over divine command. The sky is darkening even though it's midday, clouds gathering from nowhere, and the air feels heavy, expectant, like the world is holding its breath before something enormous happens. Naama comes to you with fear in her eyes, says the animals are acting strange, migrating away from water sources instead of toward them, birds flying in confused patterns. And you know what this means. You've seen the signs before in the time before time when you watched creation being formed. This is what it looks like when the natural order is about to be reorganized, when the Creator decides that something needs to be corrected, and you gather Naama close, And you look at Ohyah, who is standing on a hill with other Nephilim, oblivious or uncaring about the atmospheric changes, and you wonder if there's any way to save them, if there's anything you can do or say or sacrifice that would convince heaven to spare the innocent. But you know the answer. You've always known it. The moment you descended, you set this in motion. The moment you touched Neema, you guaranteed her world would end. And the gift you brought, the knowledge and love and connection, it's about to be washed away. And all that will remain is the memory of what happens when angels fall and humans let them in. When power meets vulnerability. When eternity touches mortality. When heaven's law is broken and creation has to be reset. And above you the clouds continue to gather, and somewhere beyond them, archangels are receiving their orders. Michael and Gabriel and Raphael and Uriel, being told to bind the watchers beneath the earth, being told to destroy the Nephilim completely, being told to prepare the water that will cleanse and erase. And you hold Nama, and you wait for the judgment you've earned. And the question that haunts you isn't whether you deserve punishment. You know you do. The question is whether knowing her was worth the price the whole world is about to pay. And you don't have an answer. You just have love and regret in equal measure. And neither one is going to stop what's coming. Chapter 4. Punishment. When God punishes. The archangel appears at dawn, and you know immediately that everything is about to end. Not because he announces himself or makes threats, but because you can feel what he is in a way that humans never could. Michael stands in the center of your settlement, radiating authority that makes your fallen essence recoil. He's not glowing or dramatic. He looks almost human, except for the absolute certainty in his bearing, the way space itself seems to organize around him. And every watcher within 100 miles can sense his presence, can feel the weight of heaven's judgment finally arriving. And you step forward, because you're Seamyaza. You're the one who led this rebellion, and if someone has to face the archangel first, it should be you. And Michael looks at you with eyes that contain no anger, no hatred, just a kind of terrible pity, the way you might look at a beloved dog that's contracted rabies and has to be put down. And he speaks, his voice carrying effortlessly across the settlement so that every human and Nephilim can hear. I bring orders from the Creator. Judgment has been pronounced. The Watchers will be bound beneath the earth until the final day. The Nephilim will be destroyed, and humanity will be cleansed with water. And you want to argue, want to beg for mercy, or at least for time, but the words die in your throat, because you can see in Michael's face that this isn't a negotiation. This is an announcement of what will be. Nama moves beside you. She doesn't understand the angelic language Michael spoke, but she understands tone, understands that something final is happening, and she asks you in her human tongue what he said, and you have to tell her, have to explain that her world is about to be destroyed, that Ohyah and all the other Nephilim will be killed, that you will be imprisoned, that she and everyone she knows will die in a flood. And she makes a sound that's not quite a scream, more like the noise an animal makes when caught in a trap. And she asks, why? What did we do to deserve this? And you don't know how to explain that she didn't do anything, that she's collateral damage in a cosmic correction, that the crime was yours, not hers, but the punishment falls on everyone. And that's when Ohyah arrives, your 7-year-old son who looks like a warrior in his prime. And he sees Michael, senses immediately that this being is a threat, and his hand goes to the bronze sword at his hip, the weapon you taught him never to draw unless he intended to use it. Michael turns his attention to Ohyah, and you see something shift in the archangel's expression, a flicker of what might be sadness, because Ohyah didn't choose to be born, didn't choose his hybrid nature, didn't choose the appetites and drives that make him dangerous. He's just expressing what he is, and Michael is about to destroy him for it, and there's no justice in that. Or maybe there is, but it's a kind of justice that requires accepting that sometimes innocent beings die because their existence threatens the larger pattern. And Michael says something you don't expect. He speaks directly to Ohyah in a language the boy can understand. He says, "I'm sorry. This isn't your fault, but you cannot be allowed to continue. Your strength will consume this world. Your children will consume the next. The line ends here." And Ohyah laughs. Actually laughs, because he doesn't believe anything can stop him. He's never been truly challenged, never encountered a force he couldn't overcome, and he draws his sword. What happens next is over in seconds, but feels like forever. Ohyah moves with all his supernatural speed, crossing the distance to Michael faster than human eyes can track, his bronze blade aimed perfectly at the Archangel's throat. And Michael doesn't block or dodge, he simply touches Ohyah's chest with one finger, and your son stops as if he's hit a wall. The sword falls from his hand, his eyes go wide with shock, and then with something worse, understanding. He finally feels what you felt when you descended, the weight of gravity, the limitation of flesh, the understanding that he's finite and small. Michael has stripped the angelic portion of his hybrid nature, left only the human part, and that human part, born too fast and too strong, can't sustain itself. You watch as Ohyah ages in moments, 7 years compressed into seconds, his body trying to catch up with where it should be if he'd grown at human rates, and it can't. The strain is too much, and he collapses, and you're running to him, you're holding him, and Neama is there too, both of you cradling this child who is suddenly actually child-sized, suddenly fragile, and his eyes find yours and he says something you never thought you'd hear from him. He says, "I'm sorry, Father. I didn't understand." And then he's gone, not dead but unmade, his essence simply ceasing as if he never existed. And Michael says, "This is mercy. Quicker than drowning, less painful than what's coming." And you want to kill him, want to rage and fight and make him hurt the way you're hurting. But you know it would be useless. And more than that, you know he's right. What he did was mercy compared to the alternative. Michael is not alone. You sense the other archangels arriving, Gabriel appearing at the northern edge of the settlement, Raphael to the south, Uriel to the west. They're surrounding not just your settlement, but the entire world, coordinating a response that's happening simultaneously everywhere the Watchers fell. And you reach out with your consciousness, trying to contact the other Watchers, trying to warn them or coordinate resistance, or just say goodbye. And you feel them. Azazel in a settlement 2 valleys over, his Defiance even now, trying to rally the Nephilim to fight. And you feel Gabriel's response, not violent but absolute. Azazel's children simply ceasing to exist the way Ohyah did, and Azazel's scream of anguish echoing through the spiritual plane. And you feel Kokabel, his daughter, the self-proclaimed goddess, trying to use astronomical knowledge to somehow predict or prevent what's coming, as if knowing the mechanics of the cosmos could help her transcend cosmic law. And you feel her unmade as well, and her mother's grief, and Kokabel's realization too late that worship and divinity aren't the same thing, that his daughter was never a goddess, just a powerful child playing at transcendence. Cythereal is not resisting. You can feel his acceptance. He knew this was coming, warned all of you from the beginning. And when Raphael comes for his children, he doesn't fight. He just holds them and whispers apologies. And they cease, and he bows his head and waits for his own punishment. And you envy him that clarity, that ability to accept consequences without the rage and grief that's tearing you apart. Armaros tries to bargain. You can sense him offering to give up his freedom, offering to be imprisoned for eternity if his son Ohyah can be spared. And you feel Uriel's response, not cruel but firm, explaining that Ohyah's existence is the problem, not his behavior. That a Nephilim who knows how to create undetectable poisons is a threat that compounds over generations. And Armaros' son ceases. And Armaros goes silent in a way that's worse than screaming. And Penomu is trying to write something. His last desperate act is to document what's happening, to create a record that might survive. And you feel his hand moving with supernatural speed, scratching words into clay tablets, trying to preserve testimony of the fall and the punishment, trying to leave evidence for whatever comes next. And Gabriel appears beside him, and the tablets crack. The words unmake themselves. Because this story is not supposed to be preserved. This knowledge is not supposed to continue. And Penomu's children cease, and his human lover ceases. And he realizes that everything he built with writing, all the records and laws and histories, will be washed away, forgotten, as if none of it ever mattered. You're kneeling in the dirt, holding Naama while she sobs over the empty space where your son was, and Michael is still standing there, waiting with that terrible patience. And you finally ask the question that's been building. You ask, why not just kill us too? Why imprisonment instead of execution? If we broke cosmic law, why are we being preserved? And Michael's answer is worse than you expected. He says because death would be mercy, and you don't deserve mercy. You're being kept alive so you can feel everything you've done, every consequence, every death, every moment of suffering that comes from your choice. You will be bound in darkness beneath the earth, but you will remain conscious, aware, and you will hear the screams of the flood, the prayers of the drowning, the silence that comes after. And you will know that you caused it. And that knowledge will be your punishment for however long the Creator decides to keep you there. And you realize that this is worse than any hell you imagined, that oblivion would be kindness compared to eternal awareness of catastrophic failure, eternal grief for what you loved and lost, eternal guilt for the suffering you caused. The sky is darkening rapidly now, clouds moving with unnatural speed, gathering from all directions, and you can smell rain, though none has fallen yet.
And Michael says, you have until sunset. Spend this time however you choose. Say whatever needs saying. Because when darkness comes, I will bind you and your brothers. And then he's gone. Not walking away, but simply ceasing to be present. And you're alone with Naama in this settlement that's about to die, and you don't know what to say to her. Don't know how to comfort someone whose child you fathered and then led to destruction, whose world you entered and broke, whose life you touched and ruined. And she's not looking at you. She's staring at the space where Ohyah disappeared. And she says in a voice you've never heard from her before, flat and empty, I wish I'd never met you. I wish you'd stayed in heaven where you belonged. I wish you'd let us develop slowly the way we were supposed to. And you want to argue, want to say that you loved her, that your time together meant something. But she cuts you off. She says whatever you felt wasn't love. Love doesn't destroy. Love doesn't take and take until there's nothing left. You wanted me the way a human wants a beautiful thing they can own. And when you touched me, you broke me. And now, everything I am and everyone I know is going to die because you couldn't control your desire. And she's right. Everything she's saying is right. And you have no defense except that you meant well. And meaning well, while causing catastrophe, is not exculpation. It's just another layer of tragedy. The other humans in the settlement are starting to realize something is wrong. They saw Ohyah disappear, saw the archangels, even if they didn't understand what they were seeing. And they're gathering, murmuring, afraid. And you stand up because you owe them something, owe them honesty at least, and you tell them what's coming.
You explain that the Creator is sending a flood, that everything will be washed away, that this is punishment for what the Watchers did, for what you taught them, for the Nephilim you created. And there's a moment of silence, and then someone asks, how long? How much time do we have? And you say hours, maybe less. The rain will start soon, and it won't stop for 40 days. And someone else asks if there's anything they can do, anywhere they can go to survive. And you want to say yes, want to give them hope. But Michael was clear. This is not a localized flood. This is global cleansing. This is the Creator deciding that the corruption has spread too far, and the only solution is to reset, start over with whatever survives. And you remember something, a whisper you heard on the spiritual plane, a righteous man named Noah building a boat at God's instruction. One family preserved to restart humanity after the waters recede. And you tell them about Noah, say that some will survive, that this isn't the end of humanity, just the end of this version of it. And they ask if they can reach Noah, if they can beg him to take them on the boat. And you say, no, it's too far. And even if it wasn't, the boat is sealed, the passengers chosen. Your only option is to make peace with what's coming. Nama stands and walks away from you. She goes to her hut and emerges with a small clay figure, something Ohyah made when he was younger, before he grew too big and too strong, back when he still played with toys. It's crude but recognizable, a little person with oversized hands, and she holds it like it's precious, like it's all she has left of him. And maybe it is. And she doesn't say anything to you, doesn't look at you, just walks to the edge of the settlement and sits down with her back against a tree, holding the clay figure and staring at nothing. And you want to go to her, want to be with her at the end, but you understand that she doesn't want your comfort, that your presence would make this worse, that the kindest thing you can do is stay away. Let her have these last hours without having to look at the being who destroyed her life. The rain starts as a mist, so fine it's almost invisible, and then it strengthens, drops becoming visible, hitting the ground with soft sounds. And the humans are handling this in different ways. Some are praying, calling out to gods who won't answer because those gods are either silent aspects of the true Creator or illusions created by Watchers. Some are holding their families, trying to be together at the end. Some are angry, cursing you and the other Watchers, cursing heaven, cursing the unfairness of being punished for crimes they didn't commit. And you can't blame them. You'd be angry too if you were in their position. You are angry even though you earned this. Angry at the Creator for making you with desires you couldn't control. Angry at yourself for indulging those desires despite knowing better. Angry at the whole situation that love and catastrophe are so intertwined that you can't separate them anymore. The Watchers are being bound now. You can feel it happening across the world. Gabriel and Raphael and Uriel and Michael and others whose names you've never learned are descending into the earth, creating prisons of darkness and stone. And you feel Azazel being chained, his defiance finally breaking into despair. Feel Kokabel bound beside him. Feel Sethariel accepting his imprisonment with that same terrible calm. Feel Armaros going silent in his grief. Feel Penomu still trying to create some record even as he's dragged down. And you feel your own time coming. Feel Michael's presence behind you. And you turn to face him and you ask one last question. You ask, will we ever be released? Is this imprisonment truly eternal? And Michael says, that's not for me to answer. The Creator will decide. There will be a day of judgment when all things are brought to account, when the imprisoned are brought forth and their fate decided. But whether that happens in 1,000 years or 1,000,000 or never, I don't know. And somehow that uncertainty is worse than knowing it would be forever, because it means hope might exist. Means you'll spend your imprisonment wondering if today is the day, if this moment is when release comes. And that wondering will be its own torture. Michael places his hand on your head, and you feel the earth opening beneath you. Feel yourself being pulled down into darkness, and your last sight of the world above is Naama sitting against that tree, still holding the clay figure, rain soaking through her clothes. And you want to call out to her, want to say you're sorry, want to say you loved her, even if that love was selfish and destructive. But the earth closes over you before you can speak, and you're falling through stone and darkness. And then you hit bottom, and chains that aren't physical, but are more real than anything physical, wrap around you, binding your essence, preventing movement or escape. And you can still hear. That's the worst part. You can hear the rain increasing above you, can hear the water beginning to rise, can hear humans praying and screaming and going silent, can hear Naama's last breath as the water reaches her tree. And you scream, but no sound emerges. You're trapped in silence and darkness, with only your grief and guilt for company. And Michael was right. This is worse than death. This is awareness without ability to change anything. This is watching everything you loved drown while you remain alive. And the water rises for 40 days and nights, and you hear every moment of it, every death, every prayer, every silence. And when it finally stops, when the rain ends and the water begins to recede, you're still there in the darkness, still chained, still conscious, still listening to the empty world above. And you understand that this is only the beginning, that you'll be here for however long the Creator decides, that the pattern you broke is being restored without you, that humanity will continue without Watcher interference, without Nephilim, without the knowledge you gifted them, starting over with whatever Noah's family remembers. And you realize that in trying to elevate humanity, you erased them. In trying to give them everything, you took away their chance to become something real. And the regret is so heavy, it feels like drowning. Except you can't drown, can't die, can only exist in this darkness with the weight of what you've done pressing down forever. And somewhere above, the flood recedes, and Noah's boat finds land, and humanity begins again. And you're still here, still waiting, still listening, still paying the price for the moment you chose to fall. And the chains hold tight, and the darkness is complete. And time passes in a way that means nothing and everything. And you're Seamyaza, the one who led the fall. And this is where your story ends. Or perhaps where it pauses. Because Michael said there would be a day of judgment, said you'd be brought forth eventually. But until then, you're here, beneath the earth, beneath the weight of oceans, beneath the civilizations that will rise and fall, never knowing you're here. And all you have is memory. Naama's face, Ohyah's last words, the sound of rain that became flood, and the question that will haunt you forever. Was knowing her worth this? Was one moment of love worth an eternity of darkness? And you don't have an answer. You just have the question, repeating endlessly. And the chains, holding forever. And the darkness, absolute and complete. And somewhere far above, life continues without you. And maybe that's the real punishment. Not the prison, but the irrelevance. Not the chains, but the knowledge that the world doesn't need you, never needed you, was actually better off when you stayed away. And that truth, more than anything else, is what breaks you in the darkness. The understanding that your gift was poison, your love was destruction, and your fall changed nothing except to make everything worse. And with that understanding comes something almost like peace, the peace of acceptance, the peace of knowing you deserve this, the peace of finally stopping the struggle and just existing in the consequence of your choice. And the darkness holds you, and time passes, and above the earth heals, and you remain, waiting for a judgment that may never come, listening for a voice that stays silent, hoping for forgiveness while knowing you've earned none. And this is where the Watchers stay, beneath stone and silence, beneath memory and myth, beneath everything that came after. And maybe we're still there. Maybe the story isn't over. Maybe the chains will break someday. But for now, for these long ages, we're exactly where we belong. In the dark, alone with what we've done. And that's a kind of justice, terrible and complete. Chapter 5. Hidden Heritage. Indelible Traces. You're standing 13,000 feet above sea level in the Andes Mountains. The air is thin enough that your lungs struggle with each breath. The sun is brutal at this altitude, reflecting off stone that's been here for so long that no one remembers who put it here or why. And you're looking at something that shouldn't exist. A wall made of stones that weigh between 50 and 200 tons each, cut with such precision that you can't slide a piece of paper between them, fitted together in patterns that interlock like three-dimensional puzzles. And the angles aren't 90 degrees. They're compound curves that would challenge modern engineers with laser-guided equipment. But according to conventional history, this was built by people who hadn't invented the wheel yet, who had copper tools at best, who were supposed to be primitive by any measure. And yet, here it stands, Sacsahuamán, a fortress or temple or something else entirely, and the local people call it the work of the gods. And maybe they're not wrong. Maybe the gods they're remembering aren't metaphors, but memories, distorted by time but rooted in something real, something that happened when beings from above walked among humans and shared knowledge that shouldn't have been shared. The official explanation is that the Inca built this in the 15th century, that they used bronze chisels and stone hammers and thousands of workers pulling ropes, that they somehow quarried these massive blocks from a site miles away, transported them across valleys and rivers, lifted them hundreds of feet up a mountain, and then shaped them with such perfection that modern stonemasons look at the work and shake their heads in disbelief. And you want to believe the official story, because the alternative is unsettling. The alternative suggests that human history, as you've been taught it, is incomplete or deliberately obscured, that there were capabilities in the ancient world that we've forgotten, or that were taken away. And you think about the Watchers, about Azazel teaching metallurgy to people who were still figuring out agriculture, about knowledge transferred in a single generation rather than developed over centuries. And you wonder if what you're looking at is evidence of that transfer, if these stones were cut not with bronze tools and patience, but with technology that was gifted, and then lost when the flood came and washed away everything except the monuments themselves. Too massive to move, too precisely made to erode quickly, standing as silent testimony to a world that existed before the reset. You kneel down and run your hand along one of the joints between stones. The fit is so tight that you can't even feel the seam, just continuous surface. And the stones aren't rectangular, they're polygonal. Each one a different shape that somehow fits perfectly with its neighbors. And the corners aren't sharp, they're slightly rounded, beveled in a way that serves no structural purpose. It's aesthetic, a choice made by someone who cared about beauty, not just function. And you think about the time this would take, the thousands of hours needed to achieve this level of precision with primitive tools, and the math doesn't work. The effort-to-benefit ratio is absurd, unless you assume the builders had capabilities we don't understand, unless you consider that maybe they had help, that maybe someone showed them how to soften stone with plant acids the way Armaros taught his humans about compounds, or how to use sound frequencies to manipulate matter the way some theories suggest the Egyptians might have moved pyramid blocks. Knowledge that sounds like magic, but is really just science we've forgotten or that was deliberately erased. The pattern repeats across the world. Massive stone structures built with impossible precision by cultures that supposedly had no contact with each other. In Egypt, you have the Great Pyramid of Giza, 2.5 million limestone blocks weighing an average of 2.5 tons each, positioned with tolerances measured in fractions of degrees, aligned perfectly with true north in a way that would require astronomical knowledge and mathematical precision that shouldn't exist in the Bronze Age. And the standard explanation is ramps and copper tools and unlimited labor. But engineers who've actually tried to replicate the work with those tools say it's not possible. Not in the time frame, not with that precision. And the pyramid isn't just a pile of rocks, it's a mathematical marvel. The ratio of its height to its base perimeter is exactly 2 pi, which means someone had calculated the relationship between a circle's radius and its circumference thousands of years before the Greeks supposedly discovered it. And the shafts inside align with specific stars, Orion and Sirius, with an accuracy that requires understanding not just where those stars are now, but where they were in relation to precession cycles, knowledge that implies centuries of astronomical observation, or direct teaching from someone who already understood celestial mechanics. In Lebanon, there's Baalbek, a temple complex built on a foundation platform that includes 3 stones called the Trilithon, each weighing approximately 1,000 tons. That's 2 million pounds per stone, and they're not at ground level. They're lifted 20 feet up and fitted together with the same precision you see at Sacsahuamán. And nearby in the quarry, there's another stone, the stone of the pregnant woman, weighing 1,200 tons, partially cut but abandoned. And you have to ask yourself, what kind of civilization quarries a stone that weighs as much as 3 Boeing 747s, plans to move it miles to a construction site, and has the confidence that they can actually accomplish this? Modern cranes can lift maybe 900 tons under ideal conditions, and that's with hydraulics and steel and computer calculations. So what did the ancients have that we don't? Or more accurately, what did they have that was taken away? What knowledge was gifted by the Watchers and then lost in the flood, preserved only in these monuments that are too big to wash away? Turkey gives you Göbekli Tepe, a temple complex that carbon dating puts at 11,000 years old, which is before the invention of agriculture, before pottery, before any of the markers we use to define civilization. And yet there it is, massive T-shaped pillars weighing up to 20 tons each, carved with intricate reliefs of animals and symbols, arranged in circular enclosures that show sophisticated understanding of sacred geometry. And the pillars aren't just stuck in the ground, they're precisely positioned, and the site was deliberately buried. Someone took the effort to fill in these structures with rubble, preserving them, hiding them, and you have to wonder why. What was so important about this place that it needed to be concealed? And what were the builders trying to preserve or protect? And the conventional explanation is that hunter-gatherers built this as a religious site, that they organized labor and developed stoneworking skills and created art, all before they figured out how to farm. But that's backwards from how we understand human development. You need agricultural surplus before you can support specialized labor, before you can feed the people who aren't hunting or gathering. So either our model of civilization is wrong, or Göbekli Tepe was built by people who had help, who had knowledge that accelerated their development beyond the normal progression. Peru offers the Nazca lines, massive geoglyphs etched into the desert floor, some of them hundreds of feet across, depicting animals and geometric patterns with such scale that you can only properly see them from the air. And the standard explanation is that the Nazca people created these as walking paths for religious ceremonies, that they never actually saw the full patterns themselves. They just followed a design they had in their heads or marked out with stakes and string. But that requires a level of abstract spatial reasoning that seems unlikely for a culture we classify as pre-technological. And you think about the Watchers looking down from above, beings who existed in the space between heaven and earth, who could see these patterns from their natural vantage point. And you wonder if the Nazca lines were messages, drawings made for someone who was watching from the sky, someone who the people remembered even after the flood, remembered and hoped might return. And they drew pictures in the only way that made sense for beings who lived above, made them big enough to be visible from heaven. And maybe that's not metaphor. Maybe that's literal memory passed down through generations, distorted but true at its core. Stonehenge in England, 5,000 years old. Massive sarsen stones weighing up to 50 tons, transported from quarries 25 miles away, arranged in a circle that tracks solar and lunar cycles with mathematical precision. And the construction shows knowledge of astronomy that shouldn't exist in the Neolithic period. The ability to predict eclipses and mark solstices and calculate the complex movements of celestial bodies. And you think about Kokabel teaching humans how to read the stars, how to track planets and predict their positions. And you wonder if Stonehenge is what happened after the flood, after the Watchers were imprisoned and the Nephilim were destroyed. When humans tried to recreate what they'd been taught, building monuments that captured astronomical knowledge in stone because they didn't have writing anymore, or the writing they had was too fragile to survive millennia. So they built calculators out of rock, permanent reminders of what they once knew, desperate attempts to preserve the gift even after the givers were gone. The Antikythera mechanism, found in a shipwreck off the coast of Greece, dated to the 1st century BCE, but showing mechanical sophistication that wouldn't be seen again until the 14th century. It's a bronze device with dozens of gears arranged in complex relationships, designed to predict astronomical positions and eclipses decades in advance. And when researchers first X-rayed it, they couldn't believe what they were seeing. It's essentially an ancient computer, a mechanical calculator that shows understanding of gear ratios and differential mechanisms that we thought were invented during the Industrial Revolution. And you have to ask where this knowledge came from. How did ancient Greeks possess engineering capabilities that disappeared and weren't rediscovered for over 1,000 years? And the conventional answer is that they were really smart and we've lost their texts. But that doesn't explain the technology gap. Doesn't explain why this level of sophistication appears suddenly in the archaeological record and then vanishes. Unless it was inherited knowledge, something passed down from before the flood, fragments of what the Watchers taught that survived in isolated pockets, preserved by secret societies or priesthoods who understood that this knowledge was dangerous, but also too valuable to let die completely. You're in a museum now, standing in front of a Mayan calendar stone, and you're reading the calculations, the long count calendar that tracks cycles of time spanning over 5,000 years, with mathematical precision that requires understanding astronomical periods that take centuries to observe. The Mayans knew about the precession of the equinoxes, the slow wobble of Earth's axis that takes 26,000 years to complete one cycle, and they incorporated this into their calendar system, which means either they had been observing the sky continuously for millennia, passing knowledge from generation to generation with perfect accuracy, or someone taught them, someone who already knew, someone who had watched the stars from a perspective outside of human time. And the calendar doesn't just track years, it predicts cosmic events. It marks the end of ages and the beginning of new ones. And the Mayans believed that we've been through multiple creations, that the gods have destroyed the world and started over several times, trying to get humans right. And you think about the flood, about the Creator deciding that the Nephilim corruption was too severe, and the only solution was to wash it all away. And you wonder if the Mayan memories of previous worlds are distorted recollections of that event, myths built on foundations of truth. The evidence is everywhere once you start looking for it. The Sumerian king list that describes rulers who reigned for thousands of years before the flood and much shorter reigns after. The Babylonian account of Gilgamesh meeting Utnapishtim, who survived a great deluge sent by the gods. The Hindu Matsya Purana about Manu being warned by a fish avatar to build a boat before the world is destroyed by water.